This is episode 15 of Cinescope, and welcome to the real world. Welcome to Cinescope, where our goal is not to criticize or to assign ratings, but rather to celebrate the movies we love, exploring story, characters, music, and relevance to the world around us. I'm your host, Chad Hopkins, and returning to the podcast today is TJ Draper to talk about one of his favorite films, The Matrix. TJ, I'm so glad to have you back.
I'm glad to be back, Chad. It is really good to be here. This will be my third appearance on this show, second official appearance.
Yes, because of course you were on the test episode where we were sort of just gauging audience reception and whether we wanted to continue doing it. And that was fun and everybody liked it. So then you were back a couple episodes later to do Wrath of Khan. And so we're continuing this theme of you introducing me to movies. This is a movie that you've been trying to get me to watch for 3 years now.
Indeed, I have. I've been shocked and appalled, Chad, that you have never seen The Matrix before. So when did you've watched it now?
I have watched it, and we're about to talk about it. But first, how about you tell us a little bit what's up with you? Because there's some exciting things that have been happening on your end of the end of podcasting, I should say.
Well, I am coming to you for the first time on this show from my podcast studio, which sounds okay. I've got a lot of acoustic foam in here, trying to deaden the very lively, unpleasantly live sound that normally is in this little closet. But that's not really that exciting. I just thought I'd throw that in there. Had I launched Night Owl the first time I was on the show? I don't remember.
I don't think so.
Okay, so Joe Darnell and I launched a podcast network called Night Owl. It's at nightowl.fm. And the show that I'm primarily doing on Night Owl is a show called Retake. And it is the spiritual successor of Movie Bite. If anybody had listened to the Movie Bite podcast before, then Retake is the spiritual successor. If not, then you should go listen to the back catalog because it's all still out there at moviebite.com. But yeah, Retake and Night Owl, and we're trying to get that get that network launched and going. Part of the problem is Night Owl is like a thing that we do, as Night Owl kind of represents the name, it's what we do on the side. So it's kind of hard to find time to get everything together and stuff. But slowly but surely, we're getting it out there into the world.
Right, burning the midnight oil to figure it out whenever you're not doing your other stuff during the day.
Exactly, yes.
I've made one appearance so far. We talked about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. together. And I still haven't caught up on that since. Yes.
Was that you? I didn't. Oh, I'm kidding.
Of course, I sound like a different person on that because we recorded that at 9 a.m. rather than 9 p.m. like we are now. But
Right. You're much more lively tonight.
Yes, I am. But it was still a good discussion. And I'm looking forward to participating more in Retake. And then, of course, I'm glad to have you back. And you'll be back in the future, I'm sure.
I'm sure. Yes.
So that being said, just a couple of usual reminders before we move into the discussion. Please go to iTunes, rate and review the show, and also, even if you don't use iTunes as your primary podcast point, alliteration for you guys, just subscribing to the podcast would be a big help. It'll help new people find the show and maybe boost us enough to reach the new and noteworthy page. That'd be really cool. And it all starts with all of you participating and rating and reviewing the show.
Yeah, I can't stress that enough.
So please, please, please just consider taking 2 minutes of your day, if even that, and helping us out. Thank you. Now, TJ, I'm sure you are so ready to talk about The Matrix.
I am. When it comes to films that I love, and particularly films that I think a lot of, sometimes I have a little bit of trepidation, like am I gonna do right by the film and that sort of thing. And every time I've talked about or written about The Matrix, I've felt that way. And tonight I was just gathering my notes furiously, going, I want to make sure I hit all the right points. And I love this film so much. It at various times I have called it my favorite film. And I think, having watched it again, it's actually been a couple of years since I watched it. I'd finally, because I used to watch it like every year or more, and I finally got to a point where I was saturated enough with it that I haven't watched it in a couple of years. But then I watched it again last night. I'm like, oh man, this is such a great film. So yes, I'm excited. I'm ready to go, Chad. I'm ready to go.
Awesome. Well, before we officially kick off, let's talk about some stats. So this movie was released on March 31st of 1999 and was directed by the Wachowskis, who also went on to direct The Matrix Reloaded, The Matrix Revolutions, Speed Racer, Cloud Atlas, Jupiter Ascending, and the Netflix series Sense8. It was also written by the Wachowskis, and the music is by Don Davis, who went on to score the rest of the trilogy, also did The Animatrix, which the Wachowskis were not necessarily involved in, and then he also scored Jurassic Park 3 following John Williams' departure after Jurassic Park 2. This movie stars Keanu Reeves, Lawrence Fishburne, Hugo Weaving, Carrie-Anne Moss, Joe Pantoliano, and Gloria Foster. So TJ, you have more to say about a first experience than I do, because my first experience was last night. So let's hear about it. What was your first experience with this movie?
Okay, so I know I've talked about this before on various podcasts and various places, but I sort of had a reawakening into films in my early 20s. And this is one that my then fiance introduced me to, my wife Rachel. She introduced this film to me. So I would have been 24 when that happened. So I didn't get to see it in the theater. So this would have been around, 24. I got to do some math here. 2004. This would have been 2004. And so I didn't get to see it in the theater because I just really wasn't into movies before that time. And I sat down, I watched it with her, and she kept telling me how mind-blowing this film was and just awesome and all these cool things and just cool concepts. And boy, was she right. I mean, I sat and I watched it, and it's hard to recall my exact feelings at the time because it's become so ingrained in me. But I know that after the first act, with the big reveal at the end of the first act, I was kind of blown away of just how great of a reveal that everything was and how well it was put together. Like there's hints, and you can certainly look back at the whole first act and go, oh, all the pieces fall into place. But it's just such a mind-blowing concept. And maybe that's because, again, I know that this concept is out there in other films, this type of thing, this virtual reality thing. And you've got stuff like Tron where people, or at least computer programs were sentient and these sorts of things. But to me at the time, it was just mind-blowing. And it was the sort of film where I knew I was going to have to watch it several more times in order to really wrap my head around all the concepts that were being put into my head, and put onto the screen. So that was kind of my first experience back in 2004 with the film. So I didn't, and I've never seen it on the big screen, which is one of my biggest regrets about having seen it just on a regular old TV. And at the time there wasn't even Blu-ray, so it was just standard definition DVD. So that was my first experience, Chad.
Cool. Well, maybe in the next year or two, when we get to the 20th anniversary, they'll have some sort of theatrical release. That would be pretty cool.
I would drive a long way to see that.
I would definitely prioritize that as well, because the big screen is what movies were made to be watched on. So anytime I get the chance to see a favorite, then I jump at it. So for me, I was 7 years old when this came out. I was not even close to a proper age for seeing this.
No, yeah, it is R-rated.
Yeah, and for some reason, I don't know. It's not that I had a lack of interest in watching this movie. I mean, even for the past few years, it's just, I knew this was one of your favorites, and I knew I needed to see it at some point, but I just hadn't sought it out. And so, that being said, growing up, I was familiar with a lot of sort of the tropes. I mean, tropes isn't exactly the right word, but I knew of the red and the blue pill, and I knew about like the slow-mo bullet dodge. There are things that The Matrix is known for, whether you've seen it or not. And those are the two particular things. And there's probably some others you can name too. Maybe Welcome to the Real World. Yeah,
there's just so much stuff from it that has been inculcated into our common pop culture.
Yeah, it's really impressive to see how it has influenced filmmaking now. I mean, slow motion was, I wouldn't say it wasn't ever used, but it had never been used in this way.
Right.
And seeing the bullet effects as time sort of slows down as Neo bends backwards, or just cool effects like that wall running or whatever it was. This was sort of a new approach to slow motion as a filmmaking technique.
Well, yeah, it was sort of subversive. Like the way they used slow motion was when you're in the middle of this big jam-packed action sequence, it's just the opposite of what you would expect. It's like, we're going to slow things down, and we're going to show you what's called, they pioneered a technique called bullet time, where they whip around you in really slow motion, so it feels like you're panning around somebody really quickly. And they pioneered that technique. And my understanding is, like, I guess technically it's CGI, but like they staged cameras in a semicircle around the actors and then stitched those cameras together to create that panning technique around these actors. Like, it was really just fantastic. Like, these were just strange things to do that worked really well for the type of film that it was. And like I said, they pioneered these techniques.
Right, and of course now you see it in a lot of films nowadays, and
Of course, yes.
it's just cool to go back and see the original, the thing that inspired it all.
Mhm.
And so even though I was familiar with those couple of things, I really had no idea what to expect from this movie. I only knew vague things about the story. I knew the character names probably because everybody knows Neo, Morpheus, Agent Smith.
Right,
But
right.
that was it. And so I sat down to watch it last night, and I had a really good time watching this movie. I was glad it wasn't super long. I was glad it wasn't super short. I thought it was a great length. I thought it was well paced. And right off the bat, it sort of brings you in and takes you on this ride, and it doesn't really let up. But that's not saying that it doesn't give you its time to slow down and maybe build characters a little bit too, because I would say I'm also surprised with some of the depth that is in this movie. It's not just a fun action flick. It does have some depth to it. So that being said, let's move on. Let's talk about story just a little bit. So what are some parts of the story that you like, TJ?
Well, you touched on like how the film opens, and that's one of my favorite things about this film. Like everything about it's favorite, but like it opens in a way that, yeah, I mean, you get to some action pretty quickly, but it opens in this way that really brings you into this world, and it's very masterful. And still, it just like introduces Trinity to us. Like that's one of the first things that we get, and even when we don't see her right away, they're basically talking about her like, it's like, no, Lieutenant, your men are already dead. And man, Trinity is just such a badass in the beginning of this film, and I just love this introduction into this world. And it does kind of throw us into the action, but it does so kind of slow. Like the first several shots of this film are just these slow panning, these old cars kind of driving up to the old building, and we're dollying into this old doorway, and there's graffiti on the walls, and it's really fantastic. I love the way this film opens.
Right, and they give you that action without explaining any of it.
Oh, yeah.
Later in the
yeah.
film, we get the same sort of action scenes, but we know the source of the slow motion. We know how these people are able to run on walls and do these extraordinary feats. But here at the beginning, it's just like, whoa, what's she doing? She just did this and she did that. Wow, she's on the wall now and she just jumped across this building. And it's really cool that we're given that without context to begin with. So we're left to wonder, how is she able to do that? And that just makes the reveal later when we learn how she's able to do that much sweeter.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the film, it's one of those films where I feel like a lot of more modern films, or just films in general, they fail to do this. This film doesn't try to explain every little thing to you. It expects you to be a big boy or a big girl and to think for yourself and to put the pieces of the story together. It's not going to sit here and explain every little detail to you. This is the sort of thing that makes it rewarding to watch on repeat viewings. I mean, there was even things last night that I noticed. Was it last night or the night before? No, it was last night. So there's even things that I noticed last night that I had never noticed before. Just some setup stuff that was paid off later throughout the film. The scene where obviously everybody knows the White Rabbit, right? Follow the White Rabbit. But like there was stuff being set up there. You just need to. Sounds Neo like you need to unplug. And you're my savior, man. You're my own personal Jesus Christ. And you're sitting here setting these things up that are being paid off throughout the rest of the film. I'm like, wow, I never noticed some of this stuff before. So it definitely is rewarding that way on repeat for repeat viewings.
Yes, I always appreciate a film that rewards you for watching it again and again. I know a lot of people approach rewatching films differently. For me, if I enjoy a film, I'll watch it once a week. I mean, it doesn't bother me at all. I love cinema so much, and I love exploring story. I love doing what we do on this show, and I do it all the time. And so when I rewatch a film, it's because I enjoy the film and I want to know more about it. And I don't really limit myself. Oh, I'm going to watch this once a year or once every 2 years. If I'm in the mood to watch Back to the Future, heck, I'm going to watch Back to the Future and I'll watch it again tomorrow after dinner. And,
right.
It doesn't bother me. So I'm looking forward already. I watched this last night. I was kind of hoping to watch it again earlier today, but I didn't get the chance. And so probably in the next couple of days, I'm about to pop in The Matrix again so I can, especially after today's discussion, explore it some more.
Nice. I'm really glad that you love this film. I just like with the last film, when I'm introducing one of my favorites to you, I'm like, is Chad going to like it? I don't know. I feel so insecure. But I'm really glad that you liked it.
Well, you know me. I love approaching things with open minds, and knowing that this is one of your favorites, it led me to look at things maybe differently than I would if it was just another film.
Yeah.
And so I was excited for the opportunity to explore this a little bit deeper. Now, one of the things about the story that I really liked was the idea that the Matrix, what Neo has been searching for, as we learn, he's been searching for it, and his name's not even Neo, he's Thomas Anderson, and he works in a software company or whatever.
Right.
But he's been searching for the Matrix, and come to find out, the Matrix wasn't something new. It was not reality. I like the idea that it's what he was living in the entire time.
You feel it when you go to work, when you go to school, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so in one sense, Neo is his real name because that's the persona that he is using in the actual real world outside of the Matrix.
Right.
I think the Matrix, ahead of watching this movie, the Matrix to me was maybe like something like the grid in Tron, where it's this other destination where you're maybe downloaded into some sort of computer. That's just sort of the idea that the Matrix brings to mind. And that's sort of what it is, except here, that's where he starts out and he has to escape from it. And I just sort of like that twist on the searching for a different reality.
Yeah, and it's so much more than just like the grid from Tron where people enter it, a few people have entered it willingly or, whatever stuff like that. This is a complete reversal, like you say. And it's I love the line from Morpheus. It's like, as he's going, the part of the quote that I just mentioned, he goes on to say, "It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes." And so it really is a sort of thing. If you've never been awake before and you're living in this simulated dream world created by computers, and you might instinctively know something is off, but you wouldn't even know what. You don't know anything else. And that's what's so great about the Matrix and the whole concept that we see here in this film.
Yeah, and going along with the introduction of the Matrix as the sort of false reality, I love the idea that once they understood that it was a false reality, that they could bend that false reality. And I love that explanation behind the slow motion and behind the enhanced superhuman abilities, is that they were able to change the reality because of their awareness that the fact that it isn't real. And so that the first time that's sort of explored is when they're going to visit the Oracle and Neo is there and the child is bending the spoon and he takes a chance at it because, hey, the spoon's not real, so that means I can do with it as I please because it doesn't really exist.
Yeah, there is no spoon. I'm sure you've heard me say there is no spoon, right? Or you probably heard it in popular culture.
I probably have, yeah.
It's so iconic. There is no spoon.
And then on this same or opposite side of the coin, maybe, I really like the idea that you can still die in the Matrix.
Oh, sure.
That's sort of a twist on maybe the dream world in Inception, where in most circumstances in a dream, if you got shot or you died in some way, you just woke up. Here, because your mind perceives it as actual death and as actual pain and actual injuries, it still processes that in the real world as if they were real injuries and you can die from it. I think that's fascinating. The exact quote is something like, the body can't live without the mind. And I think that's a really cool way to approach that concept.
Yeah. Well, they have to, if for no other reason than just because you have to have stakes in the story. And if you can't die in the Matrix, then what's the point?
Right.
But it does make sense, too, because the mind does have a lot of power over the body. And if the mind decides that you're dead, if the mind decides it's not going to live anymore, well, your body won't survive without the mind. So it's necessary to create stakes, but it also makes sense. I mean, it just makes sense.
What else about the story do you have, TJ?
Kind of what I've boiled it down to is I have a few favorite scenes, although again, like most of this movie is just so doggone compelling and so, such good cinematography. I really like in the very beginning of the film when Trinity has escaped from the building and she's about to rush to the phone that's ringing. And then we see the truck kind of slide around. And then the shot that I love is we cut to this phone ringing, and it's a pretty close-up of the phone. And then without moving the camera, nothing in the frame moves, but the focus, the lens focuses from, the focal point shifts from the phone to Trinity. Like, I love that scene. It is such good cinematography.
Right.
But okay, so from that aside, some of my favorite scenes are like Neo's training, when he's learning, they've downloaded all the stuff into his mind, but now he has to learn how to use it in the construct, right? And they're training him, and he's fighting with Morpheus, and Morpheus, basically kicks the crap out of him. And, Neo's like, "You're faster, you're stronger, I can't." Morpheus is like, "Do you believe that my being stronger or faster has anything to do with my muscles in this place? You think that's air you're breathing now?" Like, I love that scene. I don't know. It's just so compelling. I love the heck out of that scene.
Right. And speaking of how this movie influences others, that watching that scene immediately made me think of Big Hero 6 from Disney Animation, because that's how Hero trains Baymax, is he downloads kung fu moves or whatever into Baymax's little microchip. And so he has a similar scene where he's in the garage and Hero is shouting out these different kung fu moves and Baymax executes them without really knowing what he's doing. It's just sort of instinct. It's like he becomes Jason Bourne.
Right.
And the same thing happens here with Neo.
Yeah, for sure. And then, similarly to Neo's training in the simulation, the subway fight is pretty iconic, or at least to me, it's one of the standout scenes where you're seeing, at first, it seems like Agent Smith is probably going to win, and then, Neo does get some mastery over him, but then Smith, it looks like he's going to win again, but then, Neo subverts it all, and he says, "My name is Neo," and he just... I don't know. I really just love the subway fight scene. It's just such a great scene, so well choreographed. And that, overall, the choreography in this film, and unfortunately the rest of the Matrix films didn't live up to this one in terms of choreography, but the choreography in this film, it's so easy to follow, but you never feel like it's because nothing's going on. So yeah, I love that just as much as Neo's training probably.
Cool. I really like the Oracle scene.
Yes, that's on my list too.
Because the intertwining of their lives because of the Oracle and what she has said. I have more to say about the Oracle when we talk about her in the character section, but here we learn that Morpheus was told that he would find the one. Mm-hmm. Trinity was told that she would fall in love with the one, but Neo was told he's not the one in order to essentially make him the one.
Exactly.
And so these three characters, and others, of course, as well, are all intertwined based on the truth, or whatever you want to call it, that was revealed to them through the Oracle. And like I said, I don't want to talk too much about the Oracle now because I have more to say about her later. But that scene was really cool, seeing how these characters' lives have sort of been intertwined just because of what has been revealed to them.
Yeah, and there's implications there that, and I trash talk the other two films in this franchise, but there's some good stuff in them too. And this, the whole, everything with the Oracle sets up stuff that we're going to get to later in the film franchise. And, there's questions that we have there. I remember having these questions even, before I saw the other two films, like, okay, so she knows all these things, or she's setting them up? Is she actually a good guy? Like, we don't know, there's questions there. Uh-huh. At least to my mind, there was. And those questions, become things that we need to explore in later films. And so, there's not too much in this film that's like hanging, but you do get the sensation it's like there's more stories to tell in this world, But yeah, I really love meeting the Oracle, and I love her nonchalant, just the way that she approaches Neo. When you walk out that door, you'll remember you don't believe in this fate crap,
Any other scenes, TJ?
Well, the opening scene with Trinity, but I've kind of already talked about that. Uh-huh. And it's hard to pick and choose scenes in this film just because it's so well done. Like, there's no wasted scenes in this film. Everything is so good. But yeah, the subway fight, Neo's training are really standout scenes to me. That's pretty much it for me on that.
I'll say one more. So much of this, the action scenes in particular, are things that we saw maybe earlier introduced. So we have the wall running that's introduced at the beginning of the film that's brought back later. And then at one point we see the bullet dodging that's brought back later. And then finally, the very last shot of the film is Neo flying off. And it's like this entirely new thing. He can fly? Like, what the heck? So it's
Makes
just
sense.
cool seeing, it's cool seeing how at the end of the film he's come to this point where he has mastered his perception of reality to the point that he is able to bend it into flight. And it's cool that's the closing shot of the film where nobody's flown up to this point, but here's Neo and he's flying off into the credits.
Oh, speaking of Neo's mastery over the Matrix, I do remember one other scene that is really compelling that I really like is obviously the climactic scene where Neo, spoilers, big major plot spoilers here. We can talk about that, right?
Yes, of course.
Neo is dead, right? And he's, but he can't be dead. Really? Is he dead? Can he be dead? And of course, he's, because he has mastery over the Matrix and he's just figured this out, like he basically, in the Matrix, comes back to life, right? And then, like, from that point on, he has mastery over the Matrix. And, like, Agent Smith comes and he's so angry, and Neo's just, you can see, just effortlessly. Agent Smith has nothing on him anymore. And it just, I love that. I mean, and the music kind of swells into that, and it's really, it's awesome. Can you tell I love this film?
I can tell, TJ. And I just feel the need to keep pointing out these similarities between The Matrix and other films because it's really cool to trace back the origin of some of these story elements.
Right.
In the Lego movie from 2014, Emmett goes through a sort of similar transformation where he goes through much of the film believing that, or he's told that he's the one, and then he realizes, I'm probably not the one. I'm not the special. And then at the end of the film, at the climactic fight sequence, he goes back into the Lego world, and all of a sudden he is a master builder, and he perceives his reality in its minute pieces and is able to build things together. And so it's almost a straight...
I was going to say, that's almost a direct lift from The Matrix.
Right. That's a better way to put it. Direct lift. I was about to say rip-off, but I that's too negative because I love the Lego movie.
Yeah, no, the Lego movie's good, and some of it was meant to be parody. And it wasn't so much parody as homage in the Lego movie, or just like, the origins of that story point maybe were inspired by The Matrix. So it's not point for point like The Matrix, but it's pretty much a lift,
Yeah, so just another cool similarity. Now let's talk about characters a little bit. What about Neo? What do you like about Keanu Reeves as Neo?
Well, I feel like Keanu Reeves was born to play this role, and maybe only this role, but but he does so well here. Like, it works so well. And obviously Neo is the central focus of this film. I like all of our good guys, but Neo is the one who grows the most throughout the course of the film. He obviously, the character growth is focused on him. He goes from this cowardly computer hacker who can barely, get done what he needs. Like, he can't even cross this scaffolding to get to the roof in order to escape, when we start out. And then it comes down to the brass tacks. We got to figure out what are we going to do. And, Morpheus is going to die. We're going to pull the plug. And Neo's like, no, I'm making a choice. I'm going to sacrifice myself so that he can live. And that's what, what our character grows into. So he obviously has the most growth throughout the course of the film. So he's, and I guess he's my favorite. Because he is the primary focus of the film. But I hate playing favorites because I love Trinity too. And I was noticing, and I've noticed this before, I wish that she'd had more, more scenes like the opening scene, or more that showed her character. But obviously she's a very compelling character. And when she does start off as this, badass woman, but then we see the softer side of her as we go along, and that she's capable of loving Neo, and also capable of standing up to him. And she's, here's what I believe. I believe that I am the ranking officer. I believe that I love Morpheus as much or more than you do, and I believe that I'm going with you, and I believe that if you don't like it, you can go to hell. But yet we see that she's doing that from a place of tenderness and love for her crewmates and for Neo. So I love Trinity just as much as Neo, probably. I know that's probably cliche because that they're the two primary characters of the film, but there you go. And then distant, not too distant from them is, of course, Morpheus, who has a great introduction into this film the first time we see him, when he turns around from the wall that he's facing when Neo walks in, and he has those cool clip-on sunglasses, and the long flowing coat. He probably has the least character growth in the film. In fact, I don't think he grows as a character at all. That comes in the later films. But he is cool.
Yeah, he is. And he's probably the most iconic, maybe him and Agent Smith, the most iconic characters from this movie. As far as if you told somebody The Matrix and they pictured maybe a poster or something, they would probably see Morpheus, or they would see Agent Smith, because they're just sort of like the poster children for this series. They
Yes.
are the faces of these two sides of the coin.
Yes.
Now, for me, Neo, I think what was so interesting about him is that he's interesting not because he doubted reality. It was because he sort of thirsted for more knowledge. He wanted to know more. He was asking questions, and he was wanting to know the truth. And so I think there's a cool contrast between doubting, which I don't really think it's what he does here. It's more just the exploration of truth. And as he learns more truth and gains more knowledge, he's able to gain confidence in himself, like you were talking about. He starts off and he's sort of just this typical, the stereotypical nerd, maybe, or computer programmer. Or, there's sort of like a trope where the nerdy computer kid, weak, kind of not all that great with the girls, however you want to think about it.
Sure.
But by the end of the film, he's in such a different place than he was at the start. And it's because he's sought out knowledge and has gained knowledge and has grown from it.
Yeah, he's definitely the most compelling, and certainly the focus is on him.
And talking about Trinity as well, they sort of have opposite arcs. You talked about this too. At the start of the film, Trinity's the badass. At the end of the film, Neo is. Now, that doesn't make Trinity any less of one by the end, but they sort of go in opposite arcs where as Neo grows more hardcore, Trinity reveals her more human tendencies, because the introduction to Trinity, she's jumping off walls, she's dodging bullets, she's jumping off rooftops. So when we first see her, we're like, wow, this is some superhuman. I don't know what she is. I don't know if she's human or not, but eventually we see the more human side of her when she does fall for Neo, when she does make the sacrifices to put herself in danger in order to rescue Morpheus and others. And yeah, they have that sort of opposite arc.
And of course, you can't talk about, favorite characters without talking about Agent Smith. And believe it or not, like he, for better or worse, he has more character growth, you want to call it, or revelation than Morpheus does, where he goes, obviously from he goes from this agent who's part of the system to we find out he's wanting to get out of the Matrix, and that's what motivates him as a character and as a sentient program. He's of course learning and growing and becoming something, and so that's what's driving him. Which was, he wasn't just a faceless, no motivations, enemy computer program thing. He was a well-rounded character. And I think Hugo Weaving was probably born to play this role too.
Yeah, probably.
because one of my problems, like I love Hugo Weaving here, and I hated Hugo Weaving in Lord of the Rings up until like toward the end of Return of the King. I didn't like Hugo Weaving at all as Elrond, and it's because I kept seeing Agent Smith. I kept expecting him to say to end his sentences with Mr. Anderson, in the Lord of the Rings. So, but here he does such a good job of conveying, this seething kind of hatred for everything human, and it just keeps leaking out of him, more and more as the film goes on. And he just the way he phrases everything and the way he talks is so iconic to the character. He's like, "We've had our eye on you for some time." He's just
I actually wrote that down as well. I mean, he does have this sort of slow and methodical line of speech. And he's just a cool villain. He enunciates things weird.
Yes, almost Shatner-like.
Yeah, it's a weird character quirk. But at the same time, what I think makes him really interesting is that he is trying to sort of escape from his duties as a protector of the Matrix, or whatever you want to call him. And it sets up this notion of, the machines initially rebelled against humans and took over. And now we're at this point where Agent Smith, you could call him a machine. He's part of a greater machine, but he is now rebelling against the machine because he wants to sort of escape into his own, split off from his responsibility.
Yes. He doesn't want to protect the Matrix anymore.
Right. And so it's the question of a constant state of rebellion, right? As long as there's a higher power and the people below seek justice, or however you want to picture that, they are going to rebel. And so here we have the machine rebelling against the machine who rebelled against the humans. And I just think it's an interesting circle.
Yeah, for sure. And he goes from this arc of the smooth, controlled kind of, I'm in control of the situation, and he becomes increasingly agitated and angry, and eventually he's shaking, Morpheus by the shoulders, and the key is in your head, my key, I need to get it out of there, and he goes through this journey of becoming like, and ultimately that's kind of what defeats him. Is he could have ran when Neo came back to life, and he chose instead to confront Neo again, and that was ultimately his undoing.
For me, just speaking of Morpheus real quickly, I think what was most compelling about Morpheus' character, you're right, he doesn't really have necessarily a lot of growth, but I think that's sort of the draw of him. He has this unwavering belief in the fact that Neo is the one. And everything he does in this movie focuses around his belief, his constant belief that Neo is the one who's going to protect them and is going to rid them of the Matrix and is going to save mankind. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think that's just almost as compelling as having some sort of actual character growth. He is firm in his stance, and he's not going to waver, and that informs every decision he makes in this movie. Every sacrifice he makes, he almost dies because he believes that Neo was the one, and his capture helped Neo to escape. And so I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, and there's certainly something to be said for that.
Now, I did say I had more to talk about the Oracle. And for the Oracle, I thought she tells Neo that he is not the one. And, this is coming from the perspective of somebody who hasn't seen the sequels, who knows nothing of the sequels. So maybe kind of stuff is revealed in the sequels. But for me, I don't really know what to think, because at the end of the film, you sort of believe, okay, obviously Neo's the one. Even though the Oracle, who is presented as this character who only speaks the truth, and all of her predictions or prophecies or whatever you want to call them come true, but she says that he's not the one. And at the end of the film, it almost seems that nobody but Neo could be the one. And so I don't know how that progresses in future films, but it gave me the thought that maybe she's a character that doesn't speak truth, but she creates it, right? So I mentioned earlier, what she tells Neo is that he's not the one. And then by telling him that he's not the one and that he's going to have this decision to make, whether it's going to be his life or Morpheus' life, that decision that he makes informs his decisions later and sort of turns him into the one. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And that's interesting that you're picking up on these things that it took me longer to pick up on. Like, I didn't know what to think of the Oracle going into the second film, and it becomes more clear, and certainly by the third film, it becomes very clear what's happening there. But the key scene for you to remember, I don't want to reveal too much, the key scene for you to keep in mind is when Neo breaks the vase. And right before he did, she said, "Don't worry about the vase." And then he breaks the vase, and she goes, "That vase." And then and Neo goes, "How did you know I was going to do that?" And she goes, "What's really going to bake your noodle is, would you still have done it if I hadn't said anything?"
Right.
So that is the key to unlocking the Oracle. And there's some pretty interesting stuff that happens there, and some cool ways to explain what seems like possibly mysticism moving forward in the franchise maybe isn't such mysticism. That's what I'll say about that. But the Oracle, she's definitely a great addition to this film. Strategically placed, expertly cast. Everything about that scene is just so much fun. It's obviously this actor is just enjoying chewing up the scenery here. Just the whole shtick she's doing with baking the cookie and being the one is like being in love. You just know it.
And she's definitely not sort of what we sort of pictured in our head when we were told that there was going to be some sort of oracle. We didn't picture this lady in the kitchen baking cookies. We pictured maybe something a little bit more on the nose as far as oracles and soothsayers, kind of that kind of profession goes. There's some stigmas attached to that title, and she's very opposite of any of those stigmas. And so she's a cool character in that sense, both in how she's presented, but also how maybe she's not telling the truth, but like I said, she's creating it. She's more of an arbiter of truth rather than a communicator of it.
Perhaps so.
So you've got me intrigued. I'm going to have to keep watching now. I do have the trilogy, so I will be able to explore that soon.
I will say that the arc and the way that the Oracle is handled throughout the three films is really good. I will say that. I have my quibbles with the other two, but I think that you'll be pleased with the arc that takes. And even, no, I don't even want to say what one of the disappointing things was that maybe wasn't so disappointing, but anyway, we'll see. Well, I'll be interested to hear how that goes for you. I probably won't recommend them if I'm on the Cinescope in the future, because I have a lot of critiques of the other two films. But this film is the best of the series, and I love it so much. So,
well, I love talking music, and you, I'm sure, have a lot to say about the music, considering it's your favorite. So let's talk about it. What do you like about the music here?
So I do like the music. Interestingly, as much as this is my favorite film, I don't feel like the music is the most iconic. Like, I probably love stuff like James Horner's Star Trek score more. But that said, I think the music is really good. And the opening cue over the as the logos come on screen, and it's pretty iconic. Like, everybody recognizes that as the Matrix, and it does a really good job. And the entire opening musical sequence throughout Trinity's opening scene is just, it builds up to this great recognizable thematic thing going on. So I really love the opening, and Don Davis did a fantastic job there. And then I thought that he really gave us something different and new, but still feels like the Matrix when we got to the hotel ambush, where they removed the window, they changed the Matrix and removed the windows from the hotel and that sort of thing. So all the music leading up to that is really great. And then, of course, you get to the Anything is Possible. It's kind of the climactic musical cue when Neo realizes that he is the one, and he can, and that is such a great cue as well.
Right. I wrote down that track specifically because it is a standout. It's a standout on the whole album. It's a sort of mix of everything that we've heard so far up to that point, and it ends in this really awesome swell.
Yeah, it's very triumphant.
Into sort of nothingness. Like the ending is very triumphant. That's a great word.
So yeah, all the the soundtrack, or I don't know what you call it, the more instrumental stuff, not the instrumental stuff, but the actual songs in the from the various artists. I could take those or leave them, but Don Davis, the actual soundtrack, the movie cinematic score is really good.
I didn't get the chance to listen to the soundtrack until right as I was preparing to start the show tonight. And so I've listened through a lot of it, but I haven't been able to really focus on it just yet. So I watched the movie last night, and earlier today I started my notes. And the first thing I wrote was that it was a good mix of electronic and orchestral. But then listening to it right before the show, I realized, well, there's not really that much electronic in this score.
No, it's pretty orchestral.
Yeah, and I think that's really cool. I think probably the electronic is mostly in the sound design kind of stuff.
Yeah, but there's a way that he takes this orchestral feel, the orchestral instrumentation, and makes it feel like it belongs in this world. And he does a really great job. Like specifically, it's not as great to listen to as a soundtrack, but it works really well in the film. The kind of the horror aspect of in the first act, where the bug and everything, and Trinity's pulling that out with the thing, and that music is really all that stuff is really very horror-esque and works really well there too.
Yeah, there's a good mix of genre in the score. There's the horror elements you just mentioned. There's some cool action-adventure kind of stuff. There's this really triumphant, sort of heroic music and motifs at the end. And the tracks that I did listen to, there are some ideas of sort of reflection. There's lots of reflections in this movie outside of the music. When Morpheus introduces the red and the blue pill, you see there's this really great shot where you see the red pill in one lens and you see the blue pill in one lens. And
iconic, man.
Yeah, it's so cool. And I think that Don Davis was trying to emulate the idea of reflection, because that's not the only instance of reflection that you see in the film, but he emulates that in his score. And so there's some repeating motifs that you hear every now and then where I don't know, it just sort of evokes the image of a mirror in your head, because it's backwards, forwards, however you want to think about it. It's sort of introspection to a point. And I was really glad listening to this that they didn't go an all electronic route, because I think electronics are a really easy way to date your film.
Oh,
and
yes.
So, I mean, look at Tron from the 80s versus Tron Legacy.
Tron Legacy is going to hold up so much better.
Exactly, because even though there are some electronic aspects to that score, it's primarily orchestral. And Daft Punk's influence is clearly there, but it's definitely not anything like Wendy Carlos's score for the original Tron, which was great at its time. And it works for the film, but it also dates the film extremely. And so I'm glad they didn't go that route with this one. I think Mr. Davis going the more orchestral route with his score was a wise choice, and it really accompanies the film really well.
Yeah, and then I'm not quite sure. It's more woven throughout, and it rears its head here and there. I'm not quite sure where to point you, but you'll hear it, especially if you watch the film again looking for it. Trinity has a theme, and it's subtle, but it's there. And that Don Davis will use that to jerk a few tears out of our eyes later in the next couple of films. And so he winds up using Trinity's theme to great effect throughout the course of the films, because Trinity becomes even more important to the story as we go. So yeah, I think that he did a really fantastic job. And obviously Neo's theme and the Matrix theme and all that stuff is just, there's really good stuff there.
Yeah, and last thing I'll say about the music is this whole podcast we've been talking about how the Matrix influenced others. And I think that's even apparent in the music. In the first track, there were some, I heard some stuff that sounded like Inception. And I think that was, I don't know, maybe Hans Zimmer and Chris Nolan quoting that sort of intentionally, the idea of these big brassy sounds, these big brassy hits or whatever.
Well, I would say that The Matrix influenced Inception in a lot of ways. Anyway.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for sure.
And I'm sure that's more apparent to you now, having seen The Matrix.
Yes, and I definitely heard it in the music as well. I think that's really cool. Okay, let's talk about the takeaways of the film, the sort of cultural relevance. Do you have anything as far as that goes?
Well, this film asks some interesting questions. I don't know if it answers them well or has good answers, but it certainly asks questions. Who has it better? Those who live in ignorance and they just live in the Matrix and they go about their lives and they don't know the difference. Or is it better to know the truth and to fight for your life and to die fighting even? Which is better? It asks the question, right? And then you've got Cypher who has decided that the better way is to betray your friends and to get them to wipe his memory and put him back in the Matrix. I'm sorry, big spoilers, but that's what that's what he wants, and that's what the route he's decided to go. And of course, he's the bad guy. So I think the film is answering that question by saying, well, obviously, our heroes are the ones who know the truth and who fight for the truth, no matter how hard life may be. So that's kind of a pervasive theme or story, arc throughout this film is asking that question. And, Neo asks the question of Morpheus when he's right after he throws up, finding out what the Matrix is, in that big intense scene. He's going to pop. So then he asks the question of Morpheus, I can't go back, can I? And then Morpheus is like, well, if you could, would you? So that's really one of the questions this film is asking. And then, you've got the whole destiny or free will or fate, that's all tied up in there with that too. So I would say that's kind of the theme of this film.
Yeah, and I would expand that to just saying asking questions in general. Like I said, that was something about Neo that really drew me in right off the bat, was that he was asking questions. He was exploring for truth, and the desire to learn more and the idea of looking inside and looking around for truth. It's sort of prevalent in another dystopian film that I've actually talked with you about before, Oblivion, which stars Tom Cruise, Joseph Kosinski, and I love that film too because it's all about asking questions and not settling for what you know now, but seeking to know more and to learn more. And I love that theme when it's present in any movie, and I think it's done really, really well here. And the hero learns that the life he knew was a lie, so he sets out for truth. And that's just a great story arc and character arc for me. I always enjoy watching that.
Yeah, and I think the movie also kind of makes the point, for better, it is what it is, but, people in general, whether they admit it or not, they tend to prefer to have the wool kind of pulled over their eyes. I mean, at least the people in the Matrix, they don't want to know, they're not ready to know what the Matrix is, how it's enslaved them. They just want to live their lives. Uh-huh. And that's, I think we see that a lot in where you think you've got this awesome thing, this truth or whatever it is, and nobody cares, the world is a cruel place, Chad. Nobody cares.
I like the idea of belief in the unknown and in the unclear as well. We see that in Morpheus, as we talked about, where because of what the Oracle has told him and because of his experience and what he's seen and what he's learned, he believes that Neo is the one. And nothing shakes his faith in that. Even when at first maybe Neo doesn't show the aptitude that they were hoping, maybe when he's jumping across the gap between buildings or whatever. But still, he's unwavering in that belief. And then it goes on to explore the belief in oneself or one's abilities. That's presented in Neo as he masters his perception of reality and is able to bend it around him and is able to take advantage of the villain and ultimately defeat him. And so I really like that idea of belief being a strong theme here.
Yeah, I agree.
And lastly, I would say the idea of rebellion against what is wrong. And ultimately, I would say that's probably why Neo takes the red pill instead of the blue, is because this is the truth. Humans are oppressed, humans are enslaved, and he can't stand by knowing that that is the truth.
Right.
And that's... Now that he knows the truth, he doesn't want to not know it. He doesn't want to unknow something so important to reality. And so ignorance was not bliss for him.
No.
And so he chose truth. And that goes back to belief and asking questions. And the idea that even though it sort of inconveniences him because he was relatively, I wouldn't say happy with his life, but he was living it. He was making his due. But now he's doing something that's ultimately going to be so much more fulfilling because he's fighting for those who can't fight for themselves. Mm-hmm. Anything else?
I think that covers it for me.
Excellent. What about final thoughts for the film?
Man, I think I've covered everything. Just that it is a really great film. It's kind of shaped the way, because it was one of the first films I watched getting into films earlier on, back in the early 2000s. And it's kind of shaped the way I view film. I fell in love with many of the techniques that were used in this film. I thought it was a great blend of using new and modern CGI techniques, but not overusing them, which they started to do later in this trilogy. But in this film, I felt like the balance was just right. And they had a lot of practical effects that they made look digital and just all kinds of good stuff going on that way. It's a great story. It really pulls you in, and it gives you characters to love and to cheer for, and villains to hate. So it's a classic good versus evil story in that way too. So yeah, I really love this film, and I think that I wish that everybody would watch it and love it like I do.
Yeah, I think this is a good introductory film for people who are wanting to explore cinema a little bit more, because this is a movie that's really easy to just go and watch, pop a bag of popcorn, and enjoy the sci-fi and the action elements of it. But if you do explore the more cinematic aspects of it, and cinematic in terms of story, in terms of cinematography, in terms of action shooting, I mean, anything you can think of, this film presents on sort of next level beyond just popcorn flick level. And so opening your eyes to that, opening your mind to that, and just sort of acknowledging, wow, they did this, and this is why they did this, and this is how they accomplished doing this. And it's a good introductory film for that. And I mean, aside from that, it is just a fun action flick, but there's surprising depth with that as well.
Yeah, it kind of works on both levels.
Yeah, and it's definitely more heft than you would maybe expect from a film like this, but I think that benefits it all the more because it adds on another layer to it.
For sure.
And I'm looking forward to going back and watching it again, and then going on and watching the next in the series.
Yeah, I'll be interested to pick your brain once you've seen them all and see what you think.
Okay, we'll do. And that is the end of the official 15th episode of Cinescope. Thanks again for joining me, TJ.
Oh, it was my pleasure to be here. Love talking about this film.
Yes, and I'm glad you finally got me in to watch it.
Yes.
I'd love to go back to the good old days of MovieBite and see if I can find the first mention of you criticizing me, maybe for not seeing this earlier.
It was probably episode 50 when you joined me as co-host.
It probably was. I wouldn't be surprised at all. Contact for the show, facebook.com/Cinescope Podcast and @Cinescope Pod on Twitter. Please go to iTunes, take a couple minutes out of your day, rate and review, and also subscribe. Just click the button, and then you can ignore iTunes for the rest of your life. It doesn't matter. Email feedback, ideas to the Cinescope Podcast @gmail.com. And if you're interested in co-hosting, let me know what some of your favorite movies are. We'll try and fit you in sometime, because I'd love to talk about any film that you think is a favorite. I would love to talk about it. TJ, where can people find you online?
Well, if you want to keep conversating with me, I love making up words. If you want to keep going with this conversation with me, talk to me about The Matrix, get me to take the red pill. You can do all that on Twitter. That's the best place to keep up with me. I am TJ Draper Pro. If you want to follow some of the other podcasts and work that I do in that way, you can go to nightowl.fm and keep up with my show there, which Chad even occasionally appears on. And those are the places to find me.
Great. And there will definitely be links to Night Owl and to Retake in the show notes. So you can go check out TJ's stuff and listen to it, because I for one, I had been holding on to old episodes of MovieBite after I had left, because I was like, I don't want this to be over yet. But now it sort of lives on and has new life in it. And so I can go back to those episodes and I can listen to those and just continue enjoying Retake.
Well, I didn't want to disappoint you, Chad. That's why we started Night Owl.
Well, thank you very much, TJ. I appreciate it. The best place to find me is @Chadadada on Twitter. That is CHADADADA, and on Facebook.com/Chad.Hopkins. And all the show notes, all the contact information can be found at thecinescopepodcast.com. That's all for this week. Thanks again, TJ.
Oh, thank you, Chad, for watching this movie and for sharing enthusiasm with me about it.
Definitely. And thank you, everyone, for listening to episode 15. I'm Chad Hopkins. This was Cinescope, and we'll be back next week with episode 16. Have fun and celebrate movies.